Hello, bonjour, namaste. Welcome to another episode of Hackathon 2025. I'm your host Ayushi, and today we are going to dive into the US and Canada tariff situation, the challenges it brings along, and how Hackathon can actually play a role in mitigating these problems. We have a very special guest joining us, Mr. John Sabrola of CPOS, who also happens to be the partner for Hackathon 2025. I think John's already here, so let's go get him. Hi, John.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank
so happy
you.
to have you here.
Nice to meet you.
Let's get started.
Okay.
Okay. Without further ado, please tell us an overview about the tariff situation between US and Canada.
Sure. What a lot of people, what's been really publicized is the American perspective. And what a lot of Canadians don't realize or recognize is that the Canadians put a $30 billion tariff on American product, and they did not lift it when the US did. So consequently, retailers are now being faced with $30 billion worth of product that's coming from the US that is having tariffs put on it.
Right.
So merchants are having to deal with that challenge and either look for other sources of product or add to the price if they can't find something to substitute.
Right. And how do you think that's affecting the business, especially the small scale companies?
The smaller companies are having a lot more of a hard time dealing with it because of the uncertainty, how long it's going to be in place for. Is it the Canadian government has said after a certain period of time they're going to impose another $120 billion worth of tariffs, and so what kind of effect is that going to have? It just it's on a bigger scale. So the uncertainty causes a lot of anxiety,
Right.
and what a lot of the small companies don't have is access to technology, where the big companies have larger
That's true. Yeah.
infrastructure to be able to sift through things. For the smaller companies, it's a lot more challenging.
Yeah.
The same thing with the customer experience. A lot of people that run businesses, part of the value that they bring is the unique customer experience of being able to give a better experience to their customer than the big stores.
But it certainly brought out a very sense of patriotic sentiment amongst the Canadians, right? Because you see a lot of signs being put up, you see a lot of symbols, and even like a lot of conversation happening, to buy Canadian.
Yes, there is a big Canadian purchase sentiment, but there's also a lot of frustration.
Yeah.
More so on the customer side, especially for purchasing online, being able to understand what products are Canadian or Canadian origin,
Right.
or if they're buying them from Canadian companies, but more so in store. Right? If you think about the in-store customer, going and looking at products on the shelf, do they have time to run over to ask a merchant, oh, where's this from?
Right.
Is it, is the price up because of tariffs or not?
Yeah.
So yeah, there is definitely challenges in just being transparent with information to give a better user experience for the customer that's in the store, more than anything.
That's true. Right. And we hear that Loblaws has implemented a policy, in fact, where they feature a small triangle next to the prices so that it reflects that these are tariff-inflated prices for certain products.
Correct. And this is really, the big companies are taking the perspective of saying, well, we want to identify which product, so it's a triangle with a T inside it,
Right.
representing the fact that, this product is being hit with a tariff, and that's why the price is increased. So this is really a defensive mechanism that the bigger chains are taking to say, oh, it's not our fault that these prices have gone up. It's because of the tariffs. So, don't think that we're price gouging or we're jacking your prices.
Exactly.
For the small companies, it's a different, different challenge. And so, their response is going to be different.
That's true. In fact, I was watching this on the news the other day that there is a lady who runs a small-scale chocolate business here in Ontario itself. And after like maybe a decade or two of running her business from her home, she's finally shutting it down because of the tariffs. So what kind of strategies do you recommend small-scale businesses can probably take up to, tackle the situation?
One of the biggest challenges that customers are facing, and these are the customers that are purchasing, and whether they're purchasing online or purchasing in storefront, there's been a number of articles that we published about, about the end customers wanting to buy Canadian, but struggling with being able to get the right information of, what is Canadian, what isn't Canadian.
Exactly.
So that's one layer of challenge. The other challenge is, when they're in the store, to be able to identify the different brands of which are Canadian brands, which are US brands, what the ownership is. So for the small businesses, they want to promote, they're Canadian businesses, they want to promote Canadian products, but how can they effectively get that information out to their customers so their customers feel that they're, the customers' needs are being respected, and the customers have, a more unique experience in buying from the small to medium-sized businesses than they do the larger companies.
So it's not just basically about just solving the problem, but also enhancing customer experience while at it.
Exactly. The biggest challenge is, when you talk about business and how the flow of people go through, you have busy times, you have slow times, but do you have time to explain everything to your customers? And the customers have a limited amount of time, merchants have a limited amount of time. So creating or utilizing technology to give the customer a more unique experience, where if they do want to look into, the background of products or the background of where products are from, how could we use technology to facilitate that need so the customer feels like they're being respected and they have access to that information without having to stand in line and wait to get someone's attention, and then they might have the answer, they might not, or how long it'll take them to look it up. So.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, at one of the retail stores when I was shopping last week, a customer gave in her suggestion to the manager saying that they had a sign where they had basically a machine that they could just press the button in form of emojis, that how happy are you with your shopping experience today? And she said, why don't you put a sign saying that, have you bought Canadian today? Just like a red or a green button.
Right.
Something like that would be interesting for customers as well.
Sure. There's a strong sentiment for buying Canadian right now. And, for a lot of the small businesses, there's going to be a sea of change. So on one side, will there be less Americans coming up tourist-wise? There's been a dramatic change in the number of Chinese visitors because of politics. With the current politics with India, there's a big shift as well.
Yeah.
So the demographics are changing in relation to who's traveling. And so you're going to see a lot more people traveling within Canada rather than traveling outside of Canada. So, it's, in business, you see, there's an expression, one door closes, another door opens. But for the businesses, they have to be able to adjust accordingly to the type of customers that are coming in and what the needs and wants of those customers are.
That's true. That's true.
So.
And speaking of opening doors, how do you feel hackathon or an event like hackathon can play a role in solving this problem?
The utilizing of technology, or the addressing how you can take different technologies to be able to provide simple, straightforward solutions so that these small to medium-sized businesses can kind of level the playing field with the bigger companies. So how can they utilize that technology? Is it having a QR code where they can look up the information? Is it utilizing AI? One of the key elements in looking at how you can use technology is thinking about who the users are and what's the easiest way for them to be able to access the information. So when we talk about the end user, who's the customer in a store, that customer's end user is usually someone that has a cell phone, right? An Android or an Apple cell phone. So, if they're looking to get information, the easiest way for them probably to get it is to use their cell phone while they're walking through the store, however they can possibly get that. On the merchant side, some of the merchants have Android tablets, some of them have full POS systems, some of them have computer systems that are Windows-based. So the interface with the merchants of how they're going to utilize that technology or enable that technology to give a better experience to their customer is one side. The end user side, where they're getting the benefit of providing that information, is the other side. So facilitating information is one of the key elements when you talk about sales, right? Effective communication is a key element in sales where, someone, if they don't feel informed or they're not sure about something, then they're less likely to buy. If they feel informed and they feel confident, then they're a lot more likely to buy. So some of the information as far as not just where it's from, but how often or how many people have purchased that this week, that type of thing will help give added confidence to customers and help the small businesses to be more successful and have higher turnover of their product and that type of thing.
Right. And you're also mentoring a session at the hackathon event, right? How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's exciting. I mean, it's always interesting to brainstorming. There's so much change in technology that's taking place. There's a lot of access to that technology now compared to 5, 10, or 15 years ago. So there's lots of access. It's just figuring out the conduits that can be effective. That when you talk about the end user, they have a cell phone. Do they know how to to turn on the camera and put on the QR code? It's very popular in Asia, but it's not that popular in Canada or the US. But, it's the same thing with merchants. You have different ethnic, different business acumen, different education, different technology, capabilities. So when we're trying to facilitate, providing a solution, the simpler it is and the easier it is. Ease of use is a key element, because if it doesn't have ease of use, even if it's available, people won't use it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's true.
So anyways, that's when you start getting involved with trying to brainstorm different types of solutions or different formats, then there's a number of different thresholds that you have to try to get through or pass in order to find success.
Yeah, that's there. Speaking of the trade relationship between US and Canada, so how do you think, or what do you feel about the situation given currently the tariffs that have been imposed on both the sides? How can Canada probably leverage it to its advantage, and maybe this can be the way to probably have new ties with other countries?
The U.S. is being portrayed as the bad guy, and the reality is Donald Trump coming in was the same thing with Germany, the same thing with France. People wanted to change, and part of Trudeau going out was the fact that people felt that he wasn't strong enough, or he wasn't doing a good job. So we're going to see change all around the world, and the move towards carbon tax, a lot of the political agendas that were put forward, people agreed to them, and then when they realized the ramifications and the costs, then they backed down and changed their mind. Oh, that's nice, but to answer your question directly, building tools for businesses that enables them to change or adapt, and supply chain will continue to happen. So, if we're not getting, for example, grapefruits from, I was in a Sobe store a week ago, and I was looking at the grapefruits going, are these from Florida still? And no, they were from South Africa. And, I was at the meat counter, and they had clearly displayed Canadian meat, blah, blah, blah. And then they also had something on special, and it happened to be Australian beef. And I haven't seen Australian beef in a Sobe store before. So the big companies are, definitely making those adjustments, or have been making those adjustments. But what will happen is the trade relations will continue to adjust. And our high emphasis on American trade and them being a partner. And there's a very interesting quote from the president of Mexico, who said, how do you feel about this, and Canadians are really put off. And she said, we never saw the Americans as friends. We went through this, war with them, where they took California from us.
Yeah.
And, since then, we have a healthy kind of respect for each other, but we never looked at them as friends. And so that's part of the challenge, from the Canadian perspective.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting thing that happened, I want to say 20 years ago, where there was a dispute between China and Korea. Mm-hmm. And Korea, for some reason did something that the Chinese didn't like. And the Chinese government said, you know what, they're being disrespectful, and so it's unpatriotic for Chinese people to buy Korean product. Mm-hmm. And about 3 or 4 months later, Korea kind of adjusted things and they kissed and made up. But 5 or 6 years later, in the Chinese mentality, they would not buy Korean product. Right? Yeah. Just because, they had that sentiment that was put into them, and that was in the back of their mind. And so we talk about the changes that are taking place. Some of them, they are maneuvering back and forth, or it's a negotiating tactic, but some of them will have really long lasting effects. Mm-hmm. So, the challenge for merchants is to try to, collect the information as best they can as far as the changing buying habits of their customers and the different kind of customers that they're seeing compared to before, and then positioning themselves so they can not just maintain their business but actually grow and develop and build their business.
And if you would have a piece of advice to the Seneca Hackathon participants or the innovators, what would that be?
My biggest probably sentiment is to keep it simple.
Okay.
Right? The technology in the background, you can look at harnessing a bunch of different types of technology to provide a solution, but if it's too complex and the user experience isn't good, then the users won't use it. Right? So keeping it as simple as possible from the merchant side, the merchant viewing or the merchant access to information, and then the same thing with the end user or the customer that's trying to access information.
Yeah, but we're talking so much about technology and innovation and advancements, but with great power also comes great responsibility. So what is that one thing the aspiring students or the innovators should keep in mind, while they're at it, that making advancements and trying to solve the situation for us?
It's very easy to copycat, and it's challenging when you have empathy, when you think about the daily challenges that merchants are facing, how can you think about or come up with a solution that's not just going to give them the equivalent to what other companies have or big companies have at a cheaper cost, but to give them something that's more encompassing, right? That gives them a building block or a foundation that they can not just make their day-to-day business decisions, but they can also help them to craft how the direction of forward-looking they're going to go with their business.
Right. And that brings us to the end of our podcast, the last segment being the rapid fire. And since the theme for this year for Hackathon 2025 is food, I would like to start off with some questions based around food. The first one being, which is your go-to snack for brainstorming?
Go-to snack? I cut up fruit every other day or every third day. So I basically have I do it in the morning, and I have a bowl of fruit that I'll take, or if I'm driving, I'll put it in a container, and then so I find the simple sugars it works for me.
Yeah. And what's a big no-no that you avoid in your diet?
So one of the biggest challenges is sodium, and that's one of the biggest challenges as well when you're buying processed food. Mm-hmm. Whether it's pizza tastes great. Okay, there's sodium in the cheese, there's sodium in the dough, there's sodium in the sauce. Yeah. So all of that, and then if you have pepperoni or whatever, all of that. So sodium is a big factor. So chips and all those different things that taste great, and you
keep on binging.
Yeah. So reducing sodium is a key element, I think, in health. Everyone focuses on protein or calories or whatever, but actually reducing your sodium intake or balancing your sodium intake is a key element, and that's also makes you feel better. When you have too much sodium, you retain water, and you feel bloated, and it affects your general disposition. So.
And if you had to come up with one food tech product, what would that be? Or if you would like somebody else to come up with something, they know that this is something I really want, they wish they invented.
I'm trying to think about the. I have so there's an expression. If it grew on a plant, eat it. If it was manufactured in a plant, don't eat it.
Don't eat it. Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's a basic fundamental of just protein. And there's this fixation with protein, right? And protein's good for you, or you want to bulk up on protein. But most of those protein bars and it's just junk. Yeah. It's the same thing as potato chips or whatever. Yeah. It's just a different combination, but it's produced in a plant. It's got different chemicals on it to stop it from going bad. So the basic proteins are a key element in how they're processed. So some people go to say Hayal because it's held or processed a certain way, but a lot of people, even if you talk about chicken, so do most people understand when they see free range or not non-antibiotic, and they think, oh well, that's healthy chicken, but do they realize the difference between a water chilled chicken and an air dried chicken? So an air-dried chicken, when you kill that chicken and you put it in a chiller, which has cold air blowing through it, it actually reduces the weight of the chicken. So, and you have to chill the chicken after you kill it in order for it to be able to stay. Yeah. But when you take that same chicken and you water cool it, you put it in water, what does it do? It's like a sponge. It sucks up the water. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, let's say you killed that 2-pound chicken. When you air dry it, it's going to go down to 1.8 pounds. It's going to actually lose some weight because some of the water's come out of it as it's been dried out and chilled. Whereas that 2-pound chicken, when you put it in water, now all of a sudden it weighs 2.2 pounds or 2.3 pounds. Yeah. The significant difference, now you can both say that they're protein and they both have, the same amount of calories, but the reality is when you go to prepare that product, if you take that air-dried chicken and you marinate it or put olive oil or lemon on it or whatever, it's going to suck up that marinade, and you're going to get a completely different dining experience compared to the water chilled chicken. So the water chilled chicken, when you put it in marinade, it's soaked up a bunch of water. That water has to come out before any sauce can come in. Exactly. So the way that it's prepared and everything is completely different. So basically you got to cook it to get the water out of it before you can actually put a sauce on it and hope that sauce. Well, so those things all affect the way that food is prepared and how natural it is. So the more natural it can be, the better it is.
It is, right.
Not just on the consumption side, but also on on what's involved in preparation.
Right. That's an interesting one. I did not know about the preparation of chicken that way.
Yeah.
And what is your one favorite college memory?
Oh, that's a good question. So I went to University of St. Michael's College at U of T, and we had our claim to fame was one of the best orientations. So we did a protest march. Oh yeah. So this was downtown, going down Yonge Street across Wellesley, down Yonge Street to a big place where we had a couple hundred people for dinner. And anyways, so we had to come up with an idea for the protest march. So we were protesting static cling. So we had made up signs, and so it created such confusion. And we were right at Yonge and Dundas, like we all sat down on the street, and people were like, "What are you guys protesting?" Whatever. Anyways, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. It sounds
anyways,
fun.
But that's a fond memory from school.
And lastly, what are you looking forward to from the Hackathon 2025?
I'm looking forward to seeing some of the innovative solutions and some of the different types of ideas or different approaches to utilizing technology. Technology advancement is one thing. It's kind of the moving parts, but the software or the actual development of the software is, in as much as capacities are constantly being increased, but kind of that laser, and some people have that capability of using laser focus to look at the software aspect of how can we utilize this to better the lives of people. Right, and that's one of the challenges. It's not just about making money, but it's also about giving a better user experience or giving, a better enhanced life experience.
Yeah. And how sustainable that solution is in the long run, right?
Exactly.
What seems maybe a formidable solution now could not exactly be the same in the longer run.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. That brings us to the end of our podcast. Thank you, Mr. John. And it was a pleasure having you on the podcast session. And thank you for your lovely and insightful responses.
You're welcome.
All the Hackathon 2025 participants, we are excited to see you there. So stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up your way.